There's a sentence you have probably heard before. You may have seen it on a poster, or in an email signature, or printed on a motivational card somewhere. It is so famous that most people have stopped actually hearing it. The sentence is, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Maya Angelou said that. And because it is everywhere, because it's been repeated so many times, in so many contexts, by so many people, most of us have never stopped to ask, what does it actually mean for the way we speak and write in English? Today I want to tell you, not the poster version, the real version, because behind that sentence is a method, a complete approach to using language that Angelou spent 86 years building. And when you understand a method, not just a quote, your English will never be the same. Here is what I want you to think about before we begin. Think about the last time you introduced yourself in English, in a meeting, in an interview, in a professional context. What did you say? You probably said your name, your job title, your company, how many years of experience you have, maybe one or two key skills. That is a resume, not an introduction. And a resume in English connects you to no one. It gives the other person information. But information is the least memorable thing a human brain can receive. Information fades. Story stays. Maya Angelou understood something about language that most people spend their entire lives missing. The most powerful thing you can do in any conversation, in any language, including English, is tell the truth about your own experience. Not the sanitized version, not the professional version, the true version, and then trust that truth to do the work. By the end of this video, I will give you Angelou's 4 rules for using your story in English, for making every introduction, every meeting, every professional conversation you have more credible, more memorable, and more human. Before the rules, I need you to understand one thing about Maya Angelou's life, because her method is inseparable from the circumstances that produced it. Angelou was born in 1928 in Stamps, Arkansas, one of the most racially segregated parts of the United States at the time. She survived a childhood of extraordinary violence and trauma. When she was 7 years old, she was attacked by a man she trusted. After telling her family, the man was killed, and she believed her words had caused his death, so she stopped speaking. For 5 years, she was almost entirely mute. She communicated with her brother and almost no one else. During those 5 years, she read everything she could find: Dickens, Shakespeare, Edgar Allan Poe, Langston Hughes. She absorbed the English language from inside, not by speaking it, but by living inside it alone in silence. And then she began to write. And what she discovered, the discovery that became her entire life's work, was this: the more specific and honest she was about her own experience, the more universal it became. The more personal the story, the more people recognize themselves in it. Her memoir, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, published in 1969, described in precise detail the experience of growing up black and female in the American South. It was unlike anything that had been published before, and it was read by millions of people around the world, including millions of people who had never been to the American South, who were not black, who were not female, who read it and said, "This is my story too." That is a paradox at the center of Angelou's method. You do not become universal by being general. You become universal by being specific, and you do not connect with other people by hiding your experience. You connect by telling it. Rule 1, start with the truth, not the timeline. Most people, when they tell a story in English, start at the beginning. They narrate chronologically. First this happened, then this, and then, eventually after a long time, something meaningful. Angelou never started at the beginning. She started at the truth, the emotional core, the moment that mattered, and then she let the rest of the story explain how she got there. In your English introductions and conversations, this means one thing: find the real sentence first. Not, I have been learning English for 7 years. The real sentence underneath that. Why? What were you trying to reach? What changed when you did? What cost something? I started learning English the week I realized my career would never go where I wanted to go if I kept working only in Portuguese. That is a beginning, not because it is dramatic, but because it is true. and truth in English is immediately distinguishable from information. The listener's body changes. They lean forward, even slightly. Something in them recognizes, this person is saying something real. The rule: before you begin any story in English, in an interview, a presentation, a meeting, find the true sentence. The one that answers why, not what. Start there. Rule 2. The specific detail that does a universal work. This is a technique at the heart of everything Angelou wrote, and it is the hardest to understand until you feel it, and then it becomes impossible to forget. Abstract language connects to no one. It was a difficult time. I went through a lot. It changed my perspective. These sentences are technically true and completely empty. They float past the listener without landing anywhere. Specific details land, not because they're impressive, but because they are real, and real things activate memory. They make the listener remember something from their own life that rhymes with yours. Angelou did not write, "My childhood was hard." She wrote about the specific smell of the general store in stamps, the exact words her grandmother used, the weight of a particular afternoon, the color of the light through a specific window. In your English, this means, when you're telling a story, any story, find one concrete image, one specific moment, not the summary of the experience, the moment inside the experience. Not, the interview was stressful, but I got the question I had been dreading for 3 weeks, and I forgot how to say the word experience in English for about 4 seconds that felt like 4 minutes. One specific moment. That is all. That moment contains everything. The pressure, the preparation, the gap between who you were and who you were trying to become. And anyone who has ever been in a room trying to perform in a language they did not yet own will feel it. The rule: in every story you tell in English, find one specific moment, not the overview, the moment. Rule 3, the courage of I. This is the rule that almost no English learner applies, and the one that makes the most immediate difference. In professional English, there is enormous pressure to hide behind the plural, to say we when you mean I, to say one finds that when you mean I discovered, to say it was challenging when you mean I was afraid. This habit comes from a real place. In many cultures and many professional contexts, speaking from I feels arrogant or too exposed or inappropriate. And in a second language, there is an extra layer. I in English feels more vulnerable than I in your own language because you cannot yet hide behind eloquence. The English is simpler, more naked, more direct than you want it to be. Maya Angelou built her entire career on refusing to hide. Not because she was not afraid. She was afraid constantly. But because she understood that the I is not arrogance. It is accountability. It is the mark of someone who is willing to own their experience. And by owning it, make it available to someone else. In your English, practice saying I. We would usually say we or one or nothing at all. Not. It can be difficult when working in a second language, but I find it difficult still to argue in English when I am tired. My first language comes back and my second language gets quieter. That sentence is more honest. It is also more credible. It is also more interesting. And it gives the person listening permission to say something true back. That is how real conversations begin. Not with information exchange, but with honesty offered and received. The rule: say I when you mean I. Every time, without apology. Rule 4, end with what you learned, not what happened. Every Angelou story ends in the same place. Not at the end of the events, but at the beginning of the understanding. Not, and then this happened last. But, and this is what I know now that I did not know before. Most professional stories in English end with a resolution, and we solved the problem, and we hit the target, and eventually it worked out. These endings close the story, but they leave the listener with nothing to carry away. The event is complete. The connection stops there. Angelou ended with the lesson, the thing she now knows, the shift that happened inside her, not just outside her. And that shift, that movement from experience to understanding, is the only part of a story that actually transfers from one person to another. In your English, When you finish a story, in an interview, a presentation, a casual conversation, add one sentence that begins with what I learned from that was, or what that taught me was, or what I know now that I didn't know then is. You do not need to be profound. You do not need to be wise. You need to be honest. What that taught me was that being wrong in English in front of people is survivable. And once I knew that, I started taking risks I had been avoiding for years. That ending does not close the story. It opens it into the listener's own experience, their own fear, their own version of the same lesson. And they will remember you, not for what you said, for how you made them feel. Let's put all 4 rules together. Here is the same professional introduction, 2 versions. Version A. I'm a marketing manager with 8 years of experience. I've worked mostly in the B2B sector, and I specialize in content strategy. Version B. I spent the first 6 years of my career writing in Portuguese and being very good at it. Then I got a project that required me to write directly in English, and I realized very quickly that being good in one language doesn't automatically transfer. I spent about 8 months feeling like I had gone back to being a junior. What I learned from that period is that discomfort is data. It tells you exactly where you need to grow. Now I work in content strategy, and my background in navigating that gap is actually the most useful thing I bring to the teams I work with. Same person, same career, completely different impression. Version A is a resume. Version B is a person, and a person in English is always more memorable than a resume. Your challenge: write your real English introduction, not the resume version, the Angelou version. Use Rule 1, start with the truth. Rule 2, one specific moment. Rule 3, say I. Rule 4, end with the lesson. Write it below in English, as honest as you can make it. I will read every single one. And the ones that are truly honest will be the ones I reply to. If Maya Angelou changed the way you will use your story in English, subscribe. Turn on the bell, because next week, we go to one of the most powerful speakers in the history of the 20th century. A man who learned English, not his first language, not his second, his third. A man who was in prison for 27 years and came out not bitter, but strategic. A man who used the language of his former enemies not as submission, but as the most sophisticated act of political intelligence ever recorded. Nelson Mandela. And a lesson he left for every person who speaks English as a second language. Your accent is not an obstacle. Your background is not a liability. The fact that English cost you something, that you had to work for it, is not a weakness. It is, if you use it correctly, your greatest source of authority. Subscribe, and until then, tell the true story. Find the specific moment. Say, I, end with what you learned. Like Angelou, I'll see you next week.